What if I told you the first Thanksgiving almost never happened because the Pilgrims were missing one crucial thing you can't imagine living without today? Tonight, we'll uncover the shocking truth about what nearly doomed Plymouth Colony, the mysterious ingredient that saved their lives, and why the Wampanoag people held the key to their survival. You'll discover secrets that history books never taught you about America's most celebrated feast. So settle in, pull those covers up close, and let your mind drift back through the centuries with me. Tonight's journey will carry you gently into peaceful dreams as we explore this incredible tale together. If you love drifting off to educational stories like this, be sure to subscribe to Sleepy Holidays for more bedtime adventures through history. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's begin our journey to 1621. Chapter 1, New England Fall. 1621. Imagine the crisp autumn air filling your lungs as you stand among towering oak and maple trees. Their leaves, a stunning tapestry of crimson, amber, and gold, drift silently to the forest floor. The year is 1621, and you're witnessing Plymouth Plantation in its most vulnerable moment. Wooden houses huddle together against the endless wilderness, smoke curling peacefully from their chimneys into the cool morning sky. The Atlantic Ocean stretches endlessly eastward, its gentle waves whispering ancient secrets against the rocky shore. This small settlement, barely 20 humble dwellings, represents humanity's fragile foothold in the vast New World. Beyond these weathered wooden walls lies an untouched wilderness where indigenous peoples have thrived for countless generations. The contrast is striking, European ambition meeting Native American wisdom in this pristine coastal haven. Listen carefully, and you'll hear the forest's gentle symphony. Leaves rustle softly overhead, ocean waves create a rhythmic lullaby, and somewhere in the distance, the haunting call of a loon echoes across the water. This is nature's original soundtrack, unchanged for millennia. No engines, no electricity, no modern distractions, just the pure, peaceful sounds that once helped our ancestors drift into restful sleep each night. The pilgrims who call this place home are far from prepared for what lies ahead. They arrived on these shores nearly a year ago, 50 families seeking religious freedom, but finding only harsh wilderness and uncertain survival. Their European farming techniques, their imported seeds, their familiar tools, none of it works quite right in this strange new soil. They're learning the hard way that survival requires adaptation. Just beyond the settlement's borders live the Wampanoag people, the true masters of this land. For generations, they've understood every secret the forest holds, every pattern the seasons follow, every gift the earth provides. Their knowledge of corn, beans, and squash, their understanding of which plants heal and which ones harm, this wisdom will prove essential to the newcomer's survival. As autumn deepens, the pilgrims face a troubling reality. Their food stores are dangerously low, their harvest was smaller than hoped, and winter approaches with terrifying certainty. Half of their original number didn't survive the previous winter's brutal cold. Now, as colored leaves dance in the October breeze, they wonder if they'll see another spring. Survival has become their most pressing prayer. But something remarkable is about to unfold in this peaceful wilderness setting. The Wampanoag leader Massasoit, whose name means great leader, has been watching these struggling newcomers with careful interest. His people possess something the pilgrims desperately need, and perhaps, just perhaps, these two vastly different cultures might find a way to help each other survive the challenges ahead. The morning mist rises gently from the harbor, creating ghostly shapes that dance across the water's surface. Fishing boats rest peacefully at anchor, their nets empty after another disappointing catch. The Pilgrims' European fishing methods aren't working in these New England waters. They're slowly realizing that everything they thought they knew about survival, about farming, about living off the land, needs to be completely relearned. In the Wampanoag villages nearby, children laugh as they play games passed down through countless generations. Their parents prepare winter stores with practiced efficiency, smoking fish, drying corn, gathering the forest's bounty with skills refined over centuries. They know which berries ripen when, which roots provide medicine, which trees offer the strongest wood. This knowledge represents the difference between thriving and merely surviving. The pilgrim children watch the forest with curious eyes, wondering what secrets lie beyond their small settlement's borders. They've heard stories of the native people, some fearful tales from anxious parents, but also whispers of kindness and unexpected help. These children don't yet understand that their survival depends entirely on building bridges across the vast cultural divide that separates their two worlds. As evening approaches, cooking fires begin to glow throughout Plymouth Plantation. The aroma of simple stews, made from whatever ingredients remain in their dwindling stores, drifts through the crisp air. These meals lack the variety and abundance they once knew in England, yet there's something precious about gathering around these humble hearths, sharing what little they have, finding gratitude even in uncertainty. The Wampanoag people follow different rhythms, different traditions, different ways of giving thanks. Their harvest ceremonies honor the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, the sacred plants that have sustained their people for generations. They understand something the newcomers haven't yet learned, that survival isn't just about taking from the land, but about working with it, respecting it, giving back to it. Tonight, as stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky above Plymouth, both communities face the approaching winter with very different levels of preparation. The pilgrims huddle closer to their fires, praying for divine intervention. The Wampanoag people rest easy, knowing their ancestors' wisdom has prepared them well. Soon, these two worlds will come together in ways neither could imagine. And somewhere in this peaceful autumn evening, the seeds of an extraordinary friendship are beginning to sprout. A friendship that will challenge both cultures, teach both peoples, and ultimately create a celebration that echoes through history. But first, they must survive the trials ahead. Rest now and let these gentle autumn sounds carry you toward peaceful dreams as our story continues to unfold. Chapter 2. Before the Birth. Life in English Cities. Picture the cobblestone streets of early 17th century England, where our future pilgrims once walked among crowded marketplaces and narrow alleyways. The air thick with smoke from countless chimneys, brick houses pressed together like ancient books on weathered shelves, and the constant hum of daily life echoing through every corner. Here, in these bustling urban centers filled with hope and hardship, their extraordinary journey toward the New World truly began. In the shadow of towering cathedral spires, families gathered in cramped quarters, sharing meals of simple bread and thin porridge. Children played in muddy streets while merchants called out their wares from wooden carts. The smell of baking bread mixed with less pleasant odors, creating the unique scent of city life. Yet beneath this ordinary bustle, a quiet revolution was stirring in the hearts of certain faithful believers, those who would soon be called pilgrims. These were not wealthy aristocrats or adventurous explorers, but common people, farmers, weavers, and craftsmen bound together by something much stronger than social class. Their shared faith, their hunger for religious freedom, created an invisible bond that would prove stronger than any chain. In secret gatherings, they read forbidden scriptures, prayed in ways the established church condemned, and dreamed of a place where they could worship without fear of persecution or imprisonment. The morning bells would ring across the city, calling faithful citizens to mandatory services. But these future pilgrims felt the weight of spiritual compromise with every step toward the cathedral doors. Their consciences troubled, they longed for pure worship, untainted by political influence or royal decree. In candlelit rooms after midnight, they studied their Bibles, discussing passages that spoke of promised lands, of exodus from oppression, of faith that could move mountains, and perhaps move entire families across uncharted oceans. Life in these English cities meant constant surveillance, neighbors watching neighbors, suspicious glances toward anyone who seemed different or worshiped differently. The separatists, as they were known, faced mounting pressure from church authorities. Fines, imprisonment, and social shunning awaited those who refused to conform. Children grew up understanding that their family's faith made them outcasts, that their beliefs were dangerous secrets that could destroy everything they held dear, yet still, their convictions only grew stronger with each passing season. Picture William Bradford, a young man with steady hands and an unwavering heart, walking through Scrooby's quiet streets, knowing that his very presence at their secret meetings put his entire future at risk. Or imagine Miles Standish, already dreaming of distant shores where military skills might serve a higher purpose than earthly kings. These weren't rebels seeking adventure, they were ordinary people making extraordinary choices, choosing faith over comfort, conviction over security, hope over the familiar patterns of daily English life. The decision to leave everything behind didn't come suddenly like a lightning bolt on a clear summer day. Instead, it grew slowly, like dawn breaking over the horizon, as weeks turned to months of increasing pressure. Families gathered around their hearths, discussing impossible dreams, weighing the risks of staying against the uncertainties of leaving. Could they really abandon the only home they'd ever known for a wilderness that existed only in their imagination, guided by nothing more than faith and desperate hope for freedom? The women packed their most precious possessions into small bundles, heirloom recipes written on precious parchment, tiny silver spoons passed down through generations, needlework that connected them to mothers and grandmothers they might never see again. The men sold their tools, their land, everything they'd worked lifetimes to accumulate, converting material wealth into traveling funds for an uncertain voyage. Each decision felt final, irreversible, like crossing a bridge that would burn behind them, leaving no pathway back to their former lives. Children sensed the gravity of what was coming, even when adults tried to shield them from worry. Little ones asked innocent questions. Why are we selling grandfather's chair? Where will we sleep next winter? Will we see our cousins again? The answers came slowly, carefully, wrapped in promises of adventure and new beginnings. Parents held their children closer, treasuring ordinary bedtime stories and familiar lullabies, knowing these comfortable routines would soon be replaced by rocking ship decks and unfamiliar stars above unknown waters. As departure drew closer, the weight of their decision became tangible, like a heavy cloak that couldn't be removed. They'd heard whispered tales of previous voyages, ships lost to storms, passengers claimed by scurvy and starvation, colonies that failed within their first harsh winter. Yet still they pressed forward, driven by something stronger than fear, a conviction that God Himself was calling them across the vast Atlantic to establish something pure and new in the wilderness of the New World, despite every rational argument against such a dangerous dream. The final weeks in England passed like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, filled with last embraces, final letters to relatives who thought them absolutely mad, and quiet moments of doubt that crept in during the darkest hours before dawn. Some changed their minds, deciding the known hardships of religious persecution were preferable to unknown dangers of ocean crossing. Others strengthened their resolve, seeing opposition as confirmation they were choosing the right path, that their sacrifice would purchase freedom for generations yet unborn. They gathered their meager supplies, salted pork, hardtack biscuits, barrels of water that would have to last for months, seeds for planting in soil they'd never seen, tools for building homes from trees that still stood untouched in American forests. Each item represented hope, careful planning for a future that existed only in their prayers and imagination. The practical preparations revealed their faith. They weren't just fleeing persecution, they were building towards something beautiful, permanent, and holy in the wilderness. The night before departure, families couldn't sleep, walking through empty houses that no longer belonged to them, touching familiar walls for the last time, memorizing the view from windows they'd gazed through for years. Some wept quietly, mourning the end of everything familiar, while others felt only anticipation, eager to begin the adventure that would define their descendants for centuries. The same moon that shone on their childhood homes would soon illuminate their ship, carrying them toward shores that would become their children's motherland. Dawn broke over England, perhaps the last English sunrise many would ever see, casting golden light on cobblestone streets they'd walked since childhood, on church spires that had called them to worship, on marketplaces where they'd bought bread and shared gossip with neighbors. The familiar sounds, church bells, merchants calling, children laughing, would soon be replaced by creaking timber, crashing waves, and the endless whistle of ocean wind. Their English chapter was ending, but their American story was about to begin. Loading their few possessions onto carts, they moved like ghosts through streets that had shaped their entire understanding of the world. Neighbors watched from doorways, some with pity, others with admiration, a few with envy for courage they themselves could never summon. The Pilgrims walked toward the harbor, toward the waiting Mayflower, toward a destiny that would transform not just their own lives, but the entire future of a continent they'd never seen, carrying nothing but faith and everything that mattered. Behind them, England continued its ancient rhythms, markets opened, bells rang, life proceeded as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if a small group of faithful believers hadn't just begun the most important journey in American history. But ahead, across waters that stretched beyond the horizon, lay Plymouth Rock, Thanksgiving tables, and a new nation that would be built on the foundation of their sacrifice. The Mayflower waited, patient as destiny itself, ready to carry them toward their impossible dream of freedom. Chapter 3. Shipbound. The Trials of the Mayflower. Feel the wooden deck beneath weathered feet as we step aboard this legendary vessel. The Atlantic stretches endlessly in every direction. Waves crash against the hull with relentless rhythm. Inside the cramped quarters, 102 souls huddle together, their faith tested by each rolling wave. Let the gentle creaking of timbers and distant ocean sounds carry you deeper into their remarkable journey, across treacherous waters. The Mayflower was never meant for such a voyage. Originally built to transport wine and cargo along European coasts, her timbers groaned under the weight of families, livestock, and precious supplies for a new world. Below deck, the air grows thick with salt and human presence. Children press close to their mothers, while fathers whisper prayers into the darkness. Every creek tells a story of wood stretched beyond its limits, carrying dreams across an unforgiving ocean. September storms battered the vessel mercilessly. Waves higher than houses crashed over the bow, sending torrents of icy seawater through every crack and crevice. Passengers huddled in the darkness, their belongings soaked, their spirits tested by nature's fury. The ship would climb each mountainous wave, pause at its peak, then plunge into the valley below, leaving stomachs churning and hearts racing. Yet somehow, through prayer and determination, they pressed onward toward their promised land. Food became increasingly scarce as weeks turned to months. Hard biscuits crawled with weevils. Salt pork grew rancid in the damp air. Fresh water turned brackish and foul. Families rationed every morsel, every drop, knowing their survival depended on making supplies last. Children cried from hunger, while parents went without, sharing their portions with the youngest. The aroma of cooking fires was replaced by the stench of spoiled provisions, yet hope flickered like candle flames in the darkness. Disease crept through the cramped quarters like a silent predator. Scurvy weakened limbs and loosened teeth. Fever claimed the young and old alike. There was nowhere to escape the spreading illness, no fresh air, no room to quarantine the sick. Families watched loved ones suffer, powerless to help beyond offering comfort and prayer. The ship became a floating hospital where faith battled despair, and each dawn brought either relief or another soul committed to the depths below. Personal space became a precious commodity. Families squeezed into areas no larger than a modern closet. Privacy was impossible. Tempers flared over trivial matters. Children had no room to play. Adults no space to think. Yet in this forced intimacy, something beautiful emerged. Strangers became family, sharing stories, songs, and dreams of the life awaiting them. The close quarters that should have driven them apart instead wove them together into a community bound by shared suffering and hope. Night brought little rest aboard the rolling vessel. Sleep came in fragments between the ship's constant motion and the sounds of fellow passengers. Mothers sang lullabies to children who couldn't understand why the ground never stopped moving. Men took turns standing watch, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of land. The darkness amplified every fear, every doubt, every whispered prayer. Yet morning always came, bringing renewed determination and the steady rhythm of waves carrying them toward their destiny. The ship's main beam cracked during a particularly violent storm, threatening to split the vessel in two. Panic spread as quickly as the news. Everyone understood what this meant. Without the beam, the Mayflower would break apart in the churning seas. But among their belongings, someone had packed a great iron screw. Together, passengers and crew worked to repair the damage, their lives depending on this single moment of ingenuity. The beam held, and with it, their hopes for survival. Women faced unique challenges in the ship's confines, cooking over small fires in rolling seas, tending sick children with limited supplies, maintaining modesty in crowded quarters. They washed clothes in salt water that left everything stiff and uncomfortable. Pregnancy and childbirth became matters of life and death, with no medical help available. Yet these women showed extraordinary strength, supporting each other through hardships that would have broken lesser spirits. their resilience becoming legend among those who survived. Children adapted to ship life with remarkable flexibility, learning to walk on constantly shifting decks, playing quiet games in tight spaces, listening to stories told in hushed tones to pass the endless hours. Some were born during the voyage, taking their first breaths in the belly of a ship, never knowing solid ground. Their laughter provided moments of joy amid the hardship, reminding adults why they endured such suffering. These children would grow up to build a new nation. The smell of the ship became a complex mixture of humanity, salt spray, tar, spoiled food, and unwashed bodies created an aroma that clung to everything. Fresh air existed only on deck during calm weather. Below, the atmosphere grew thick and stifling. Passengers learned to breathe through their mouths, to focus on other senses. The sound of waves became their lullaby, the creaking timbers their constant companion. These sensory memories would haunt survivors for years. 66 days at sea tested every aspect of human endurance, bodies weakened by poor nutrition and constant motion, minds strained by confinement and uncertainty, spirits challenged by loss and suffering. Yet something remarkable happened in those depths of trial. Faith deepened, community strengthened, purpose clarified. The passengers discovered reserves of strength they never knew existed. Each day survived became a victory, each sunrise a blessing, each prayer a lifeline to hope. When Cape Cod finally appeared on the horizon, grown men wept with relief. The cry of land echoed through every corner of the ship. Passengers rushed to whatever windows they could find, desperate for their first glimpse of the new world. But their trials were far from over. This wasn't their intended destination. Winter was approaching, and the unfamiliar coastline held its own dangers. Still, after 2 months at sea, any land felt like a miracle. The Mayflower Compact was born from their shared suffering. Men who had endured hardship together recognized the need for order in their new world. They gathered in the ship's cabin, still rocking gently at anchor, and pledged to work together for the common good. This document, written on a floating vessel, would become the foundation of American democracy. Their time at sea had taught them the value of cooperation over conflict. Even anchored in Provincetown Harbor, the ship remained their temporary home. Exploration parties ventured onto shore, while families stayed aboard. The contrast between solid ground and rolling deck felt strange to sea-weary legs, but the Mayflower continued to shelter them, her worn timbers providing familiar comfort. While they searched for a permanent settlement, she had carried them safely across an ocean, and her work wasn't finished. Their floating sanctuary would protect them through winter's approach. As we drift away from the Mayflower's story, let the rhythm of her waves carry you toward peaceful sleep. Feel the resilience of those who survived, their strength flowing into your dreams. The creaking timbers fade to whispers, the salt spray becomes gentle mist. Their incredible journey reminds us that human spirit can weather any storm, so rest now, cradled by the same ocean that carried their hopes, knowing that tomorrow's challenges, like theirs, can be overcome with faith and determination. Chapter 4: New Land, New Worries. First winter in Plymouth. Land ho! But with those two precious words came a brutal reality that would test every ounce of their faith. The November wind cut through their worn clothes like invisible daggers, and ahead lay months of darkness, hunger, and loss that would forever change these weary travelers into something stronger, something unbreakable. Picture the scene: snow falling in thick, silent curtains across an endless wilderness. The forest stretched before them like a white ocean, vast and unforgiving. Ancient trees stood like frozen sentinels, their bare branches reaching toward gray skies that promised nothing but more cold, more snow, more challenges than these English families had ever imagined facing in their homeland dreams. The work began immediately, axes biting into timber, hands bleeding from rope and nails. Every board they cut, every nail they hammered, every foundation stone they laid was a small victory against the approaching winter. Men, women, and children worked side by side, building not just homes, but hope itself, one exhausting day at a time in this strange new world. But the cold was relentless, creeping through gaps in hastily built walls like an uninvited guest. Frost covered everything by morning, their breath visible in the air, even inside their crude shelters. The wind howled through the settlement like a wild animal, testing every joint, every beam, every desperate prayer whispered into the darkness of those endless winter nights. Hunger became their constant companion, gnawing at their stomachs and clouding their thoughts. Their supplies dwindled faster than anticipated, and the harsh land offered little in return for their efforts. Each meal became precious, each bite carefully measured, and as they learned the hard mathematics of survival in a place that seemed determined to reject their presence entirely. Then, illness struck, sweeping through their small community like wildfire. Weakened bodies succumbed to diseases they couldn't name or understand. Makeshift infirmaries filled with moaning voices while healers worked with herbs and prayers, their only weapons against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day of that merciless first winter in Plymouth. The physical hardships were matched only by the mental strain, as doubt crept into even the strongest hearts. Was this God's plan, or had they made a terrible mistake crossing that vast ocean? Yet somehow, in the darkest moments, their spirits found ways to endure, to bend without breaking, like trees weathering the storm. Community became their salvation, neighbors sharing their last portions of grain, families taking in orphaned children, the strong carrying the weak when hope seemed lost. They discovered that survival wasn't just about food and shelter, but about the invisible threads that bind people together when everything else falls apart around them in the wilderness. Each dawn brought new challenges: frozen water buckets, snow blocked doorways, another name added to the growing list of those who wouldn't see spring. Yet they rose each morning, cleared the snow, melted the ice, and continued the work of living, one small task at a time, proving that human determination knows no limits. The bitter cold seeped into everything: their bones, their dreams, their prayers whispered into the darkness. Fires became sacred things, precious sources of warmth and light, gathering places where they shared stories of home and hopes for spring. Around these flickering flames, they found moments of comfort in the midst of their impossible circumstances. Food became more precious than gold. Every kernel of corn, every strip of dried meat, carefully rationed and treasured. They learned to make soup from bones, bread from whatever grain remained, and meals from ingredients they never would have considered. Back in England, discovering strength in simplicity and gratitude in scarcity. Building their settlement became an act of faith, each log placed, each roof beam raised, each crude wall erected was a declaration that they believed in tomorrow. Working together, they transformed raw wilderness into something resembling home, creating shelter not just for their bodies, but for their dreams of a better future in this new land. Loss visited them repeatedly that winter, taking parents, children, friends who had journeyed so far only to fall just short of the promised land. They dug graves in frozen ground, said prayers over makeshift markers, and somehow found ways to honor the dead while continuing to fight for the living, carrying forward the dreams of those they'd lost. Yet, in the darkest depths of winter, something remarkable began to grow, not in the frozen soil, but in their hearts. Hope, stubborn and inexplicable, took root despite everything they'd endured. They began to see beyond survival, to imagine harvests, celebrations, and the possibility that their suffering might birth something beautiful and lasting. As spring finally whispered its first promises, as the snow began to melt and green shoots pushed through the earth, they realized they had survived something extraordinary. They had passed through winter's crucible and emerged not unchanged, but transformed into something stronger, ready to plant seeds that would grow into America's first Thanksgiving. But behind that first feast of gratitude, hidden beneath the celebration we remember today, lay hardships and compromises that history has gently forgotten, secrets about what they truly ate, who was invited to the table, and the complex relationships that made their survival possible. Truths that might surprise you. Chapter 5: Seed of Hope, the Arrival of Spring. After months of bitter cold and crushing despair, something magical begins to stir in Plymouth. The ice that once gripped the harbor starts to crack and melt, releasing the sweet sound of flowing water. Sunlight lingers just a little longer each day, warming the frozen earth beneath the settlers' weary feet. Hope, like the first tender shoots of grass, slowly begins to emerge. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The gentle drip, drip, drip of melting icicles from the crude cabin roofs. The settlers emerge from their dark shelters, blinking in the brightening light, like creatures awakening from hibernation. Their faces, once gaunt with hunger and fear, now turn upward toward the warming sun. William Bradford steps outside, breathing deeply the crisp air that no longer burns his lungs with winter's sting. The forest around Plymouth begins its own quiet transformation. Bare branches that seemed lifeless just weeks before now show the faintest hint of green, tiny buds swelling with promise. The earth itself seems to exhale, releasing that rich, earthy scent of soil, awakening from its winter slumber. Patches of snow shrink back, revealing brown earth that will soon burst with new life, new possibilities. In the early morning hours, before the settlement fully stirs, you can hear the first tentative songs of returning birds. Sparrows chirp softly from the budding trees, their voices like tiny bells announcing spring's arrival. The harsh cries of seabirds mix with these gentler sounds, creating a symphony of renewal that lifts the spirits of everyone who listens. Even the wind sounds different, warmer, more welcoming than before. Mary Brewster kneels beside her cabin, carefully examining the small plot of earth she's been preparing. Her weathered hands, scarred from winter's hardships, gently touch the soil. It's still cold, but no longer frozen solid. She can work it, shape it, prepare it for the seeds that will mean the difference between life and death in the coming year. Her eyes shine with something that's been absent for months: hope. The settlers gather their precious seeds, carefully hoarded through the darkest months. Each kernel of corn, each bean, represents more than food. They are promises of tomorrow, guarantees that this community might actually survive. The children watch with wide eyes as adults handle these treasures with reverence, understanding, even at their young age, that these small things hold enormous power. Without modern plows or tractors, the settlers must break the earth with simple tools: wooden spades, hoes fashioned from whatever metal they could salvage. The work is backbreaking, but there's joy in it now. Each turned clod of soil, each furrow carved into the earth, brings them one step closer to self-sufficiency. The men take turns, their muscles straining, but their spirits lifting with each passing day. Watch as Priscilla Mullins carefully places each seed into its earthen cradle. She covers them gently, like tucking children into bed, whispering small prayers over each tiny promise of life. The indigenous techniques they've begun to learn fascinate her, the way certain plants grow stronger when planted together, the wisdom of working with nature rather than fighting against it. Knowledge passed down through countless generations. The morning mist rises from the harbor, creating an ethereal backdrop as the settlers tend their growing plots. Steam drifts from the warming earth, carrying with it the green scent of new growth. Everything seems softer now, gentler. Even the harsh lines of the wooden palisade seem to blur in the gentle light, making Plymouth feel less like a fortress and more like home. As days lengthen and warm, the first brave shoots push through the soil. Tiny green flags of victory, declaring that life persists, that hope was justified. The settlers gather around these small miracles, marveling at nature's resilience. Children point and laugh with delight, their voices bright with wonder. These simple plants represent more than food. They represent the future of Plymouth Colony itself. But the settlers are not alone in their joy at spring's arrival. From the forest edge, watchful eyes observe their farming efforts. The Wampanoag people have lived in harmony with these seasons for countless generations, understanding the rhythms of planting and harvest in ways the English are only beginning to grasp. Their presence, though still cautious, carries wisdom the colonists desperately need. Samoset, the Abenaki Sagamore, who first approached the settlement, watches the colonists struggle with their primitive farming methods. His trained eye sees mistakes they don't even know they're making, inefficiencies that could mean the difference between abundance and famine. The soil speaks to him in ways it doesn't speak to the English, revealing secrets of cultivation passed down through generations of his people. The indigenous understanding of companion planting, the three sisters of corn, beans, and squash, growing together in perfect harmony, represents knowledge the Pilgrims have yet to discover. Each plant supports the others, the corn providing support for climbing beans, the beans enriching the soil with nitrogen, the squash leaves shading the ground to retain moisture. Wisdom born of centuries of careful observation. As spring deepens into early summer, the gap between what the settlers know and what they need to learn becomes increasingly clear. Their European farming methods, suited to different soil and climate, struggle in this new world. The Wampanoag knowledge, refined through countless seasons, to solutions they haven't even considered. Two worlds of agricultural wisdom, waiting to meet, waiting to merge. The forest paths that connect Wampanoag villages to Plymouth carry more than footsteps. Now they carry possibility. Spring has awakened not just the earth, but the potential for something unprecedented, cooperation between two peoples who desperately need what the other possesses. The English need knowledge, the Wampanoag need allies. Both need hope, and spring has delivered it in abundance. As this chapter of spring renewal draws to a close, the seeds planted in Plymouth soil mirror the seeds of relationship being planted between two peoples. Both will need careful tending, patience, and wisdom to flourish. But for now, in the gentle warmth of lengthening days, hope feels as tangible as the green shoots pushing through the earth, promising better days ahead for all. Chapter 6. The Allies. Wampanoag to the rescue. As autumn painted the Massachusetts landscape in golden hues, the Wampanoag people moved through their ancestral lands with quiet wisdom. For thousands of years, they had called this place home, understanding every seasonal rhythm, every whisper of the wind through ancient oaks. Their knowledge would soon become the lifeline that transformed struggling colonists into grateful neighbors, setting the stage for America's most cherished tradition. The Wampanoag viewed the land not as property to be owned, but as a living entity to be respected and nurtured. Every hill, every stream, every grove of trees held stories passed down through generations. They understood the delicate balance between taking and giving, between harvest and rest. This deep connection to the earth, this intimate knowledge of nature's cycles, would prove invaluable to the Pilgrims who had arrived so unprepared for the harsh New England wilderness. In the heart of Wampanoag villages, smoke rose gently from carefully tended fires, while children learned the sacred art of farming from their elders. The women were master agriculturalists, their hands skilled in coaxing life from the soil. They had perfected techniques that European settlers had never imagined, methods that worked in harmony with the land's natural patterns, creating abundance where others saw only wilderness and hardship. Maisie, the golden treasure that would save the Pilgrims, grew tall and proud in Wampanoag fields. This wasn't just any corn, but varieties carefully selected and bred over centuries. Sweet corn for immediate eating, flint corn for long storage, dent corn for grinding into meal. The Wampanoag had developed dozens of types, each adapted to specific purposes, each representing generations of agricultural wisdom that Europeans were only beginning to understand. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, grew together in perfect harmony in Wampanoag gardens. This wasn't mere coincidence, but sophisticated agricultural science. The corn provided stalks for beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil to feed the corn, while squash spread across the ground, its broad leaves shading the earth and retaining precious moisture. It was nature's own design, perfected by indigenous wisdom. Massasoit, the great Sachem of the Wampanoag, watched the struggling Plymouth settlement with careful eyes. His people had observed these pale strangers since their arrival, noting their mistakes, their desperate attempts to survive in an unfamiliar land. The decision to help them wouldn't come lightly, for trust had been broken before with other European visitors. Yet something about these particular settlers, their families, their apparent desire to stay, stirred compassion in Massasoit's heart. Samoset was the first to make contact, walking boldly into Plymouth one March morning and greeting the startled colonists in broken English. The Pilgrims were amazed. Here was a native who could speak their language, learned from earlier encounters with English fishermen along the coast. His friendly demeanor and outstretched hand offered the first real hope of peaceful coexistence, the first glimpse of salvation for the struggling colony that had lost so many through the harsh winter. Then came Squanto, whose story was one of incredible resilience and forgiveness. Kidnapped years earlier by slave traders, sold in Spain, escaped to England, and finally returned home, only to find his entire village wiped out by disease. Yet this man, who had every reason to hate Europeans, chose instead to help them. His knowledge of both cultures, his ability to translate not just languages, but entire ways of life, made him the perfect bridge between two worlds. Under Squanto's patient guidance, the Pilgrims learned the secrets that would ensure their survival. He showed them how to fertilize their corn with fish, burying alewives in each hill to enrich the soil. He taught them when to plant, when to harvest, how to prepare the ground, how to read the signs that nature provided. These weren't just farming tips, but survival techniques refined over thousands of years, generously shared with people who desperately needed them. The Wampanoag taught the colonists about the bounty of the forest, showing them which berries were safe to eat, which roots provided nourishment, how to tap maple trees for their sweet sap. They shared knowledge of medicinal plants, remedies that could ease suffering and heal wounds. Every lesson was a gift, freely given to people who had arrived as strangers, transforming the harsh wilderness into a place where European families could actually thrive. As spring turned to summer, trust began to bloom between the two communities. Wampanoag children played alongside Pilgrim children, their laughter echoing across the settlement. Women exchanged recipes and techniques, learning from each other's traditions. Men worked side by side in the fields, sharing tools and knowledge. This wasn't just practical cooperation, but the beginning of genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and shared hardship overcome together. By autumn of 1621, the harvest had exceeded everyone's wildest hopes. The corn stood tall and golden, the beans hung heavy on their vines. Pumpkins and squash dotted the fields like scattered treasures. The Pilgrims had learned well from their Wampanoag teachers, and the land had responded generously. For the first time since their arrival, they could look ahead to winter without the gnawing fear of starvation, their cellars full of nature's abundance. Governor Bradford declared a time of thanksgiving, not just for the successful harvest, but for the friendships that had made it possible. Runners were sent to invite Massasoit and his people to join the celebration. This wouldn't be a quiet European religious observance, but something entirely new, a fusion of traditions, a celebration that honored both Pilgrim gratitude and Wampanoag generosity, the seeds of a uniquely American tradition beginning to take root. When Massasoit arrived with 90 of his warriors, the small Plymouth settlement was transformed into something resembling a festival. The Wampanoag brought 5 deer to add to the feast, their contribution ensuring there would be plenty for everyone. Cooking fires blazed day and night, the air filled with the mingling aromas of European and Native American cuisines, creating flavors and combinations that had never existed before in either culture. For 3 glorious days, 2 very different peoples shared food, stories, and laughter. Pilgrim children watched in wonder as Wampanoag men demonstrated their athletic skills, while native youth marveled at European tools and customs. Languages mixed in the air, English and Algonquian, creating a unique dialect of friendship. This wasn't just a meal shared, but cultures blending, creating something beautiful and entirely new, the true spirit of Thanksgiving being born. As the celebration ended and the Wampanoag departed, both communities carried something precious with them, the knowledge that different peoples could not just coexist, but truly help each other thrive. The seeds of Thanksgiving had been planted, not just in the successful harvest, but in the friendships formed, the knowledge shared, the barriers overcome. This spirit of gratitude and cooperation would echo through centuries, becoming the heart of America's most cherished holiday tradition. Chapter 7: Farming in Harmony, a partnership between cultures. As summer deepens into autumn, something beautiful unfolds in the fields surrounding Plymouth. The maize stalks reach toward the changing sky, their golden tassels swaying in the crisp morning breeze. But it's not just the crops that are growing, it's the understanding between 2 very different peoples. The Wampanoag and the settlers work side by side now, their voices mingling softly across the harvest rows, creating a harmony that feels almost magical in the gathering dusk. The gentle rustling of corn leaves creates nature's lullaby as Massasoit's people share ancient wisdom with their new neighbors. Squanto demonstrates the art of hill planting, placing corn, beans, and squash together in perfect harmony. The settlers watch with wonder as he explains how the three sisters support each other, corn providing structure for climbing beans, beans enriching the soil with nutrients, squash spreading wide to shade the earth and retain precious moisture. This indigenous knowledge transforms their understanding of cultivation completely. Edward Winslow walks slowly through the rustling rows, his weathered hands learning to feel the readiness of ears beneath their husks. Beside him, a young Wampanoag man named Habamak demonstrates the gentle twist that reveals perfectly formed kernels. Their conversation flows in broken English, mixed with native words, but their mutual respect needs no translation. The autumn air carries the sweet scent of ripening corn and the distant smoke of cooking fires, creating an atmosphere of peaceful cooperation. As the leaves begin their transformation from green to gold, the women of both communities find common ground in preservation techniques. Priscilla Alden watches intently as Wampanoag women demonstrate the art of drying corn, their practiced movements creating rhythm in the fading afternoon light. They layer husked ears on woven mats, turning them regularly in the gentle breeze. The settler women share their own knowledge of root cellars and salt preservation, creating a beautiful exchange of survival wisdom. The children are the first to bridge the cultural divide completely. Young Peregrine White and Remember Allerton play alongside Wampanoag children, their laughter echoing through the cornfields like music. They chase butterflies between the tall stalks, their games teaching each other words in different languages. Watch them now, sharing berries and nuts, drawing pictures in the soft earth, creating friendships that know no boundaries. These innocent bonds become the foundation for lasting peace between their peoples. Governor Bradford walks the perimeter of their expanding gardens, marveling at the transformation. Where once stood scraggly, struggling plants, now thrives abundance beyond their wildest dreams. Pumpkins sprawl like orange cushions between the corn rows, their vines heavy with promise. The beans climb skyward in perfect spirals, their leaves creating gentle shade. He pauses to touch a plump ear of corn, feeling gratitude swell in his chest for the generous knowledge that made this miracle possible. The harvest moon rises full and golden above Plymouth, casting silver light across the abundant fields. Tonight, both communities work together by moonlight, gathering the fruits of their shared labor. Soft voices carry across the rows as baskets fill with corn, beans, and squash. The night air is cool and crisp, perfect for the work ahead. This moonlit harvest feels sacred, a blessing shared between peoples who have learned to trust each other completely. Squanto moves through the cornfields like a gentle ghost, his knowledge flowing freely to any who wish to learn. He shows the settlers how to read the signs of readiness, the brown silk, the firm kernels, the way the husks pull back naturally when the time is right. His patience is endless, his generosity boundless. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine his kind voice explaining the ancient ways, his wisdom bridging two worlds with perfect grace. The storage houses fill steadily with the harvest's bounty, each kernel representing hope for the coming winter. Wampanoag women teach settler wives the intricate art of grinding corn into meal, their stone tools creating rhythm like gentle percussion. The sweet, earthy scent of ground corn fills the air as both communities prepare for the cold months ahead. This shared preparation creates bonds deeper than words, forged through the universal language of mutual survival and care. Massasoit visits the settlement regularly now, his presence bringing calm to both communities. He walks through the gardens with Bradford, their conversations growing easier with each passing day. They discuss the weather, the harvest, the changing seasons, simple topics that build trust, like small stones, creating a strong foundation. The autumn wind carries their voices across the fields, a sound of peace that would have seemed impossible just months before. The first frost arrives gently, painting the remaining pumpkin vines with delicate crystals that sparkle in the morning sun. This signals the final harvest push, and both communities respond with quiet urgency. Baskets move steadily from field to storage, filled with the summer's generous gifts. The air grows crisp and clear, perfect for the work of preservation. Every squash, every dried ear of corn represents security and the beautiful partnership that made it all possible. Evening meals become celebrations of cultural exchange as new flavors blend with old traditions. Settler women learn to prepare succotash, mixing corn and beans in earthenware pots over open fires. The Wampanoag taste European herbs and marvel at their pungent flavors. Children from both communities gather around the cooking fires, their faces glowing in the firelight as stories and recipes pass between cultures like precious gifts shared with generous hearts. The late autumn afternoons grow shorter now, but the work continues with quiet determination. Corn stalks rustle softly in the cooling breeze as hands work together to gather the last of the harvest. The golden light filters through the remaining leaves, casting everything in warm amber tones. This peaceful scene, these gentle sounds, the soft voices sharing knowledge, all combine to create a tableau of harmony that seems almost dreamlike in its perfect beauty. As November approaches, both communities begin to sense that something special is building. The successful harvest has created more than food security, it has created genuine friendship and mutual respect. Plans begin to form for a celebration of gratitude, a feast that will honor both the abundant harvest and the partnership that made it possible. The idea grows naturally, like the crops themselves, rooted in shared joy and watered with appreciation. The preparation for their great feast begins with the same spirit of cooperation that marked their farming efforts. Hunters from both communities work together to provide game, while the women plan dishes that honor both cultures. The children help gather nuts and late berries, their excitement infectious. This isn't just about sharing food, it's about celebrating the bonds that have grown stronger than anyone dared imagine just months ago when survival seemed so uncertain. As you settle deeper into peaceful sleep, let your mind rest in these autumn fields where two worlds learn to work as one. Feel the gentle breeze carrying the sweet scent of harvest. Hear the soft rustle of corn leaves, whispering stories of cooperation and hope. The foundation for America's first Thanksgiving has been laid with respect, shared labor, and growing friendship. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight there is only gratitude and peace. Chapter 8: Harvest Moon, Celebration on the Horizon. The September moon hangs full and luminous above Plymouth, casting silver light across fields that just months ago seemed barren and hopeless. Tonight, something magical stirs in the crisp autumn air. The pilgrims emerge from their humble dwellings, their faces glowing not just from moonlight, but from something deeper, something that will echo through centuries of American tradition. Look closely at these weathered hands, calloused from months of desperate labor, now gently cradling ears of corn that shimmer like gold in the moonlight. Each kernel represents hope fulfilled, each stalk a small victory against starvation and despair. The harvest moon illuminates more than crops tonight. It reveals the transformation of a struggling community into something resembling, dare we say, prosperity. Listen, can you hear the soft rustle of corn stalks swaying in the gentle breeze, the distant murmur of voices filled with wonder and relief? William Bradford steps into the moonlit field, his usually stern expression softened by something approaching joy. Around him, other pilgrims gather, drawn by an instinct they cannot yet name, a calling toward celebration that seems as ancient as the harvest itself. Mary Allerton kneels beside a pumpkin vine, her fingers tracing the smooth orange surface of fruit that seemed impossible just weeks ago. Remember, these are people who survived on boiled leather and tree bark, who watched half their number perish in that first brutal winter. Now, surrounded by abundance, they helped create something profound stirs within their weary souls, something that whispers of gratitude and celebration. The Wampanoag have been watching from the forest edge, Massasoit and his warriors observing these strange European settlers with curious eyes. They see something familiar in this moonlit gathering, something that echoes their own harvest ceremonies, their own traditions of giving thanks to the Creator for the earth's bounty. Perhaps these pale strangers understand more about gratitude than they first appeared to know. Elder Brewster raises his weathered hands toward the harvest moon, his voice carrying across the field in whispered prayer. But tonight his words feel different, not the desperate pleading of a starving man, but something approaching joy, approaching thanksgiving. Around him, other voices join in, creating a harmony that seems to rise with the silver moonbeams toward heaven itself. Watch as young John Alden takes tentative steps through the moonlit rows, his movements almost dance-like, celebratory. These rigid Puritans, so disciplined in their faith, so restrained in their expressions, tonight seem touched by something wilder, something more ancient than their stern theology. The harvest moon awakens instincts that civilization cannot completely suppress, primal urges toward celebration and thanksgiving. Priscilla Mullins gathers her skirts and begins to move between the corn rows, her steps light and rhythmic, almost ceremonial. Other women join her, their usually somber faces glowing with moonlight and something resembling, could it be, happiness? This humble dance across the harvest fields carries whispers of thanksgiving that seem to echo from some deep ancestral memory of celebration. The children emerge from the settlement, drawn by sounds they cannot understand, but somehow recognize. Little Love Brewster claps her hands to the rhythm of rustling corn, her laughter silver bright in the moonlight. Even in this harsh new world, even among these disciplined Puritans, the ancient human impulse toward harvest celebration cannot be denied, cannot be suppressed by theology or hardship. Massasoit steps from the shadows, his presence both surprising and somehow expected. The pilgrims pause, uncertain, but the harvest moon seems to bridge the gap between cultures, between peoples who share this fundamental understanding of gratitude for the earth's gifts. In this silver light, differences blur, and something universal emerges, something that transcends language and custom. The Wampanoag chief gestures toward the abundant fields, his words flowing in his native tongue, but his meaning clear in any language. This is thanksgiving, this is celebration, this is recognition of the sacred cycle of planting, tending, harvesting, and giving thanks. The pilgrims nod in understanding, their hearts opening to wisdom that predates their arrival by countless generations. Under this harvest moon, barriers dissolve like morning mist. English and Wampanoag voices blend in a harmony of gratitude, their different words expressing the same profound emotion. This moment, this moonlit recognition of abundance and survival, plants seeds of something larger, something that will grow into a tradition spanning centuries, though its true meaning may be forgotten. Governor Bradford feels something shift within his pragmatic heart, a stirring towards celebration that his Puritan training cannot quite suppress. Perhaps he thinks as moonlight bathes the abundant fields, perhaps there is room in their faith for thanksgiving that goes beyond mere survival, thanksgiving that embraces joy, that welcomes feast and fellowship and the sacred act of sharing abundance. The harvest moon reaches its zenith, and with it, the pilgrims reach a moment of recognition. This land, so hostile just months ago, has provided. This community, fractured by loss and hardship, has endured. This partnership with indigenous neighbors, so tentative and uncertain, has bloomed into something approaching friendship. Thanksgiving, true thanksgiving, begins to take shape in their grateful hearts. As the moon begins its descent toward the western horizon, whispered conversations turn toward planning. There must be celebration. There must be feast. There must be formal recognition of this incredible abundance. The seeds of America's most enduring holiday are planted in this moonlit moment, though none can imagine how their simple thanksgiving will echo through 4 centuries. The pilgrims slowly return to their dwellings, but something has changed beneath this harvest moon. In their hearts burns new warmth, new hope, new understanding of gratitude that transcends mere survival. Tomorrow they will begin planning the feast that will become legend, but tonight they simply dance in moonlight, giving thanks for abundance they once thought impossible. Chapter 9, Hospitality Etched in Time, Preparing for the Feast. As autumn clouds gather overhead, casting gentle shadows across Plymouth, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The historic feast preparations commence with careful, deliberate movements. Without refrigerators, gas stoves, or pre-packaged ingredients, these remarkable people face an incredible challenge. How do you feed dozens of guests using only what nature provides and your own ingenuity? The answer lies in ancient wisdom, community cooperation, and unwavering determination. Picture the scene. Soft morning light filters through the settlement as women emerge from their homes, baskets in hand. They gather around the communal cooking areas, their breath visible in the crisp fall air. No modern conveniences exist here. No electric mixers, no measuring cups, no thermometers. Everything must be done by touch, by sight, by generations of inherited knowledge. The preparation begins with the most fundamental task, building and maintaining the cooking fires that will burn for days. The crackling of kindling fills the morning air as skilled hands tend to multiple fires. Each flame serves a different purpose, some for roasting, others for baking, still others for the slow, gentle simmering of stews. The fire builders understand that temperature control means everything when cooking for such a momentous occasion. Too hot, and the food burns. Too cool, and it won't cook through. These fires must maintain steady heat for 3 full days of continuous cooking and preparation. Without modern ovens, bread becomes an art form requiring incredible skill. Women knead dough by hand, feeling for the perfect texture that signals readiness. They've created makeshift ovens from clay and stone, heated by placing burning coals inside until the walls glow with warmth. The coals are then swept out, and the bread goes in, baking from the residual heat. The timing must be perfect. There's no temperature dial to rely on, only experience and intuition. The aroma of baking bread begins to weave through the settlement, mixing with other enticing scents. Wild herbs gathered from the surrounding forests add their earthy fragrance to the air. Sage, thyme, and other native plants are carefully prepared and preserved. Without salt mines or spice traders, every flavor must come from what grows naturally in this new land. The colonists have learned from their Wampanoag neighbors which plants enhance food and which should be avoided entirely. Water, something we take for granted, becomes a precious resource requiring careful management. Every drop must be carried by hand from the nearest well or stream. Large iron kettles, some of the heaviest items brought from England, are filled and set over the fires. These kettles will simmer continuously, creating broths and stews that will feed the growing crowd. The constant tending of fires and water requires a coordinated effort from the entire community working in perfect harmony. The preparation of meat presents its own unique challenges in this era before refrigeration. Freshly hunted game must be processed immediately or it will spoil. Skilled hands work quickly, cutting and preparing portions for roasting over open flames. The colonists have learned techniques for preserving meat through salting and smoking, methods that ensure nothing goes to waste. Large spits are constructed over the fires, allowing whole birds and joints of meat to slowly roast, turning golden brown. Vegetables and fruits require their own special attention in this pre-modern kitchen. Root vegetables must be carefully cleaned by hand, dirt scrubbed away with coarse brushes made from dried corn husks. Pumpkins and squash are hollowed out to serve as both ingredients and cooking vessels. The colonists have discovered that these native gourds can be filled with other foods and placed directly in the coals to cook, a clever technique learned through necessity and experimentation over many months. As evening approaches, the settlement glows with the warm light of cooking fires reflected against wooden structures. Candles and oil lamps provide additional illumination for the detailed work that continues into the night. The preparation cannot stop. Too much depends on perfect timing for the feast to succeed. Hands work steadily by this gentle light, chopping, stirring, seasoning, the rhythmic sounds of preparation, knives on cutting boards, spoons stirring in pots, create a peaceful, meditative atmosphere throughout the community. Children help where they can, carrying water, gathering firewood, and learning the traditional skills they'll need throughout their lives. This feast preparation becomes a teaching moment, passing down knowledge from experienced cooks to the next generation. Young hands learn to test bread for doneness by tapping the crust and listening for the right hollow sound. They discover how to judge when meat is perfectly cooked by its color and the way juices run when pierced. The sounds of preparation create a natural symphony in the settlement. Crackling fires provide a constant, comforting backdrop. The gentle bubbling of simmering stews mingles with the soft conversations of neighbors working together. Wooden spoons tap against iron kettles, creating a rhythmic percussion that speaks of community cooperation. The rustling of corn husks being prepared, the soft thud of knives chopping vegetables, all these sounds weave together into something deeply peaceful and satisfying to experience. Without refrigeration, timing becomes absolutely critical for the success of this massive undertaking. Foods that spoil quickly must be prepared at precisely the right moment. The community works with the careful coordination of a well-rehearsed dance, each person knowing their role, each task timed to perfection. Some dishes can be prepared days in advance, while others must wait until the very last moment. This intricate scheduling requires wisdom, experience, and trust in one another's abilities and reliability. The crisp fall air carries the mingled aromas throughout the settlement and beyond. Smoke from the cooking fires drifts lazily upward, carrying with it the promise of abundance and celebration. The scent of roasting meat combines with the earthy fragrance of vegetables and the sweet aroma of baking bread. These smells travel on the autumn breeze, reaching the Wampanoag visitors and announcing that something special and significant is taking place. A true feast of friendship and gratitude is being lovingly prepared. As the second day of preparation unfolds, the settlement has transformed into a bustling outdoor kitchen. Every available surface serves as workspace. Wooden tables, flat stones, even clean sections of the ground become areas for food preparation. The community has organized itself with remarkable efficiency, each family contributing their unique skills and specialties. Some excel at bread making, others at preparing meat, still others at gathering and preparing the wild plants that will add variety and nutrition to the celebration feast. The final day of preparation arrives with a sense of anticipation that fills the air like morning mist. Every detail must be perfect, every dish ready at precisely the right moment. The coordination required is extraordinary, especially without clocks or timers to guide the process. Instead, the community relies on the natural rhythms of cooking, the way bread sounds when ready, how long shadows grow to indicate the passing hours, the instinctive knowledge that comes from generations of shared cooking wisdom and careful observation. As the sun begins to set on this final day of preparation, the settlement glows with accomplishment and anticipation. 3 days of careful, coordinated effort have transformed simple ingredients into a magnificent feast. The air is rich with the aromas of perfectly prepared foods, roasted meats, fresh bread, seasoned vegetables, and the promise of abundance. Tomorrow, these prepared dishes will bring together two very different communities in celebration, gratitude, and the sharing of a harvest that represents survival, cooperation, and hope. Chapter 10, Unforgotten Menu, Feast of 1621. Picture this: the autumn air carries the rich scent of roasting fowl and wood smoke as weary families gather around crude wooden tables. But this isn't the Thanksgiving feast you know today. No golden turkey takes center stage here, no creamy mashed potatoes, no sweet pumpkin pie cooling on kitchen windowsills. Instead, wild goose crackles and pops over dancing flames, tender venison sizzles in heavy iron pots, and the tantalizing aroma tells a completely different story. The morning of the feast arrives crisp and clear. October sunlight filters through bare branches as both communities prepare for something unprecedented. Wampanoag hunters arrive carrying freshly killed deer, their shoulders laden with the day's bounty. Meanwhile, Pilgrim women tend bubbling cauldrons, their faces flushed from hours spent over open fires. Children dart between the groups, eyes wide with curiosity and anticipation. This isn't just a meal, it's the birth of a tradition that will echo through centuries, though few today would recognize these humble beginnings. Let's explore what actually graced those rough-hewn tables. The centerpiece isn't turkey, but wild fowl, probably geese and ducks, that filled the marshlands. Their meat is darker, richer, with a gamey flavor that modern palates rarely experience. Alongside, massive haunches of venison hang over glowing coals, the meat tender from slow roasting. These deer, gifts from Wampanoag hunters, represent more than sustenance. They're offerings of friendship, gestures of goodwill between two worlds, learning to coexist, one meal at a time. Fresh fish also adorns the table, bass and cod, pulled from nearby waters that morning. Their silver scales catch the firelight as they're prepared with simple seasonings, salt being a precious commodity. The pilgrims know these waters now. They've learned from their indigenous neighbors where the best fishing spots hide. Each flaky piece represents knowledge shared, lessons learned through months of near starvation. These fish aren't just food, they're symbols of survival, proof that cooperation can fill empty bellies when winter threatens. But where are the vegetables we associate with Thanksgiving? No mashed potatoes, because potatoes haven't yet made their way from South America to New England tables. No sweet potato casserole topped with marshmallows. Those southern roots remain undiscovered here. Instead, turnips and onions provide earthiness to the meal. Corn appears, but not on the cob. It's ground into coarse meal, baked into bread that's dense and filling. Squash might grace the table, but certainly not in pie form. Sugar remains desperately scarce. The Wampanoag bring their own contributions, foods the pilgrims are still learning to appreciate. Wild berries, dried from summer's harvest, add sweetness to the meal. Nuts gathered from forest floors provide protein and richness. Corn prepared in ways the Europeans never imagined, seasoned with herbs that grow wild in these coastal forests. These dishes represent knowledge, wisdom passed down through generations of living in harmony with this land. Each bite teaches the newcomers something vital about survival, about gratitude, about the abundance that surrounds them. As the first day unfolds, both communities share more than food. Stories flow across language barriers, translated through gestures and broken words. Children from both groups play together, their laughter echoing through the settlement. The feast isn't formal. People eat with their hands, wiping greasy fingers on rough cloth. There's no china, no crystal glasses, just wooden bowls and horn cups filled with water or weak beer. Yet the simplicity makes everything more precious, each morsel savored, each shared smile building bridges between two very different worlds. The second day brings more abundance. Fresh game and fish replenish the tables. But tensions also surface, small misunderstandings over customs and protocols. Some pilgrims worry about the duration of the celebration, concerned about winter preparations. A few Wampanoag question whether this friendship will endure beyond the feast. Yet these conflicts resolve through patience, through Elder Brewster's calming words, through Massasoit's steady leadership. Each resolution strengthens the bond, proving that differences can be worked through, that understanding grows with time and effort. By the third day, something magical has happened. The two groups no longer sit separately. Families intermingle around the fires. Pilgrim women learn Wampanoag cooking techniques, watching how indigenous hands prepare corn in ways that maximize nutrition. Wampanoag men examine European tools, curious about these strange implements brought from across the ocean. Knowledge flows both ways, creating a tapestry of shared experience that will influence both communities for generations. This isn't just a feast anymore, it's the birth of something entirely new, a fusion of worlds. The beverages tell their own story of adaptation. No wine graces these tables. The grapevines here produce fruit too sour for European tastes. Instead, clear water from nearby springs quenches thirst. Its purity, a blessing after months of worried rationing. Some beer remains from the ship's stores, carefully hoarded for special occasions. The Wampanoag share herbal teas, brewed from plants that offer both flavor and medicine. Each sip represents trust, indigenous knowledge, freely given to strangers who desperately need to understand this new land's gifts. As evening falls on the third day, the celebration takes on a different character. The urgent hunger of survival gives way to genuine fellowship. People linger by the fires long after the food disappears. Stories emerge from the flickering shadows, tales of hardship overcome, of kindness shown when hope seemed lost. Pilgrim voices speak of their dangerous journey, the storms that nearly claimed them, the disease that took so many. Wampanoag elders share wisdom, speaking of seasons and cycles, of how the land provides for those who respect its rhythms. The children have created their own traditions during these 3 days, games that blend Pilgrim and Wampanoag customs, laughter that needs no translation. They race between the settlements, carrying messages and small gifts, their innocence building bridges where adult caution might hesitate. Their easy acceptance of each other offers hope, proof that different cultures can coexist, can even thrive together. As parents watch their children play, they begin to envision a future where cooperation replaces suspicion, where understanding grows from shared experience. The feast's simple ingredients create complex flavors. Each bite reveals the land's character, the saltiness of coastal air, the richness of forest game, the earthiness of root vegetables pulled from New England soil. These foods will never make it into future Thanksgiving traditions, too wild, too unfamiliar for generations that prefer domesticated flavors. But here, in this moment, they represent pure abundance, the miracle of survival, the blessing of having enough to share, when just months ago, starvation seemed certain. As the feast winds down, both communities understand something profound has occurred. This wasn't just a meal, it was a covenant, an agreement sealed not with signatures, but with shared bread, shared stories, shared hope for the future. The pilgrims have learned they cannot survive alone in this wilderness. The Wampanoag have seen that these strangers might become allies rather than threats. Each group has given something precious: trust, knowledge, acceptance. The empty bowls and cold fires mark the end of a celebration, but the beginning of something larger. The leftovers from this historic feast disappear quickly, but the memories linger like wood smoke in autumn air. Families return to their homes carrying more than full bellies. They carry hope, proof that survival is possible, that kindness exists even in the wilderness. And the pilgrim children will remember the taste of venison. The Wampanoag children will recall European bread. These flavors become bridges between worlds, connections that will outlast the individuals who created them. Food has done what words alone could not. It has made strangers into neighbors. And so the first Thanksgiving feast ends, not with speeches or ceremonies, but with quiet gratitude and full hearts. The simple menu, wild and unfamiliar by modern standards, nourished more than bodies. It fed hope, strengthened resolve, and proved that abundance comes not from having everything we want, but from sharing what we have. As the fires die down and families drift toward sleep, they carry within them the taste of something sacred, the flavor of survival, the sweetness of community, the unforgotten menu of 1621. Chapter 11: The Unsung Heroes. Wampanoags at the Feast. As twilight painted the autumn sky in gentle hues, our story turns to the true architects of this remarkable gathering, the Wampanoags, whose presence transformed a simple harvest meal into something extraordinary. Their quiet strength, their deep understanding of the land, their generous hearts, all wove together to create magic that would echo through centuries. Let us honor their contributions, often overlooked, yet absolutely essential to this moment in history. 90 Wampanoag men arrived at Plymouth not as mere guests, but as dignified leaders and skilled providers. Chief Missasoit walked among them, his presence commanding respect from both communities. These were not the simple, primitive people that history sometimes portrays, but sophisticated individuals with complex social structures, deep spiritual beliefs, and centuries of wisdom about thriving in this harsh New England landscape. Their arrival brought an energy, a completeness to the gathering that the Pilgrims had never experienced before. The Wampanoags came bearing gifts that would sustain the feast for days. 5 deer, their meat rich and tender, provided the protein that would feed over 140 souls. But their contributions went far beyond food. They brought knowledge of which berries were sweetest, which roots could be ground into nourishing flour, which herbs would flavor the simple pilgrim fare. Every offering demonstrated their deep connection to this land, their understanding of its rhythms, its generous bounty when respected properly. Watch them move through the gathering, notice their natural elegance. Dressed in finely crafted clothing, deerskin softened to perfection, adorned with shells and feathers that caught the firelight. Their movements were purposeful, graceful, each gesture speaking of confidence earned through generations of living in harmony with nature. The pilgrim children watched in wonder, drawn to their calm presence, their easy laughter, the way they seemed to belong so completely to this place the colonists were still learning to call home. Generosity flowed from the Wampanoags like water from a spring. They shared not just food, but knowledge, teaching the pilgrims which mushrooms were safe, how to prepare corn in ways that maximized its nutrition, which plants could heal common ailments. Young Wampanoag men demonstrated hunting techniques, showed children how to track animals through the forest, shared secrets of reading weather patterns in cloud formations. This was education through kindness, wisdom offered without expectation of reward, pure generosity of spirit. The wisdom they carried ran deeper than practical knowledge. Elder Wampanoags spoke of balance, of taking only what was needed, of honoring the spirits that dwelled in every tree, every stream, every stone. They understood concepts the pilgrims were just beginning to grasp, that survival meant more than simply not dying. It meant thriving in partnership with the land, building relationships that would sustain future generations. Their presence brought a spiritual dimension to the feast, a sense of sacred connection to this sacred place. As the fire crackled lower, as bellies grew full, and hearts grew warm, the true magic began. Storytelling, the ancient art that bound the Wampanoag community together, emerged naturally from the gathering. Elder voices rose and fell like gentle waves, weaving tales that had been passed down through countless generations. Children from both communities drew closer, their eyes wide with wonder, as worlds of imagination opened before them. This was how knowledge lived, how culture survived, through the sacred act of sharing stories. The oral history of the Wampanoags unfolded like precious scrolls, each story a treasure trove of wisdom and wonder. Tales of how the world began, how the first corn grew from the body of a sacrificing maiden, how animals learned to speak with humans in the time before time. These weren't just entertainment, they were education, moral instruction, spiritual guidance, all woven into narratives that made profound truths accessible to listeners of all ages. History lived in these voices, breathing and warm and infinitely precious. Listen as they spoke of their ancestors, the great chiefs and wise women who had walked this land before them. Stories of Massasoit's father, of brave warriors who defended their people, of healers whose knowledge of plants could cure any illness. Each tale painted pictures more vivid than any book, more real than any written record. The Pilgrim adults found themselves as captivated as the children, drawn into a world where courage, wisdom, and honor lived in the actions of remarkable individuals who had shaped this land. The land itself became a character in their stories. They spoke of when the great ice departed, how the rivers carved their paths, why certain hills held power, and certain groves demanded respect. The Pilgrims learned that every feature of their new home had meaning, had history, had stories that stretched back thousands of years. This wasn't empty wilderness waiting to be tamed. It was a landscape rich with memory, with spirit, with the footprints of countless generations who had loved it, protected it, learned from it. But not all stories were solemn. Laughter bubbled up like spring water as humorous anecdotes emerged. Tales of foolish young braves who ignored their elders' warnings, of raccoons who outsmarted hunters, of children whose curiosity led them into amusing predicaments. The universal nature of these stories, their gentle humor, their warm wisdom, created bridges between the two cultures. Pilgrim and Wampanoag children giggled at the same silly moments. Parents smiled at familiar themes of youthful mischief and hard-won wisdom. The children became the bridge between worlds, their natural openness creating connections that transcended language barriers. Young Wampanoags taught Pilgrim children games, played with corn kernels and smooth stones, while Pilgrim children shared songs from their homeland across the sea. Watch them playing together, their laughter mixing with the evening air, creating something entirely new, a sound that belonged neither to the old world nor to the ancient ways, but to this moment, this magical gathering where future possibilities were being born. Camaraderie bloomed in the spaces between stories, in shared smiles, in the universal language of kindness. Men from both communities found common ground in their concerns for their families, their hopes for successful harvests, their pride in their children's accomplishments. Women discovered similarities in their daily struggles, their creative solutions to practical problems, their deep love for their communities. These human connections, simple yet profound, created bonds that transcended cultural differences, language barriers, for centuries of separate histories. Warmth radiated from more than just the fires that night. It flowed from open hearts, from genuine curiosity about each other's ways, from the recognition of shared humanity despite surface differences. The Wampanoag's patience in answering endless questions, their grace in overlooking cultural misunderstandings, their willingness to share their most precious possessions, their stories, created an atmosphere of acceptance and wonder. This warmth would be remembered long after the last embers cooled, long after the guests departed, long after the season changed. Cultural exchange flowed in both directions, like a gentle river. While the Wampanoags shared their ancient wisdom, the Pilgrims offered glimpses of distant lands, strange customs, different ways of understanding the world. Together they created something new, a blend of traditions that honored both histories while pointing toward an uncertain but hopeful future. This exchange, this mutual respect, this recognition of each other's gifts, represented the very best of what human communities could achieve when fear gave way to curiosity, when suspicion yielded to friendship. As our chapter closes, remember these unsung heroes, the Wampanoags, whose generosity made the feast possible, whose wisdom enriched every conversation, whose stories added magic to an already remarkable gathering. Their contributions, often overlooked in later retellings, were essential to creating this moment of peace and gratitude. They gave not just food for the body, but nourishment for the spirit, hope for the future, and memories that would warm hearts for generations to come. Their legacy lives on in every story shared, every hand extended in friendship. Chapter 12, Games and Merriment, the festive spirit of the Pilgrims. As twilight settles over Plymouth, the dying embers of celebration still glow warmly in the darkness. For 3 magical days, these ordinarily somber colonists had cast aside their austere ways, embracing joy in ways that would surprise us today. The echoes of laughter still drift through the crisp autumn air, while weary bodies settle into peaceful rest after days of unexpected merriment. You see, the Pilgrims weren't always the stern, serious figures we imagine from history books. During these 3 days of Thanksgiving, something remarkable happened. Their rigid daily routines dissolved, replaced by spontaneous games and competitions that revealed a playful side rarely documented. Men who normally spent dawn to dusk in backbreaking labor suddenly found themselves racing, wrestling, and engaging in contests that brought out boyish grins and hearty belly laughs. The games began simply enough, with contests of strength and skill that doubled as practical training. Young men competed in musket loading, seeing who could prime, aim, and fire with the greatest speed and accuracy. These weren't mere amusements, but vital skills wrapped in friendly competition. The winner earned bragging rights, while everyone benefited from the practice that might one day save their lives during conflicts or hunting expeditions. Wrestling matches drew eager crowds as colonists and Wampanoag warriors tested their strength against each other. The rules were simple, honor based, and surprisingly gentle for such a rough activity. Men grappled in the soft earth, cheered on by their families, creating bonds of respect that transcended cultural boundaries. These physical contests became bridges connecting 2 very different worlds through the universal language of friendly competition and mutual admiration. Foot races sparked the most excitement, with runners sprinting across the settlement's cleared grounds. Children darted between adult legs, their delighted squeals mixing with the encouraging shouts of spectators. Even the normally reserved pilgrim women found themselves clapping, calling out encouragement, their faces flushed with uncharacteristic animation. These races, historians believe, planted the earliest seeds of what would eventually become our modern Thanksgiving Day football traditions. As evening approached, the games took on a more social character. Someone produced a set of crude dice, and gambling games emerged around the flickering firelight. Now, the Pilgrims typically frowned upon such activities, but these were extraordinary days. Small wagers were placed, nothing more valuable than extra food rations or minor personal items, creating excitement without threatening anyone's survival or violating their deeper religious convictions. Music drifted through the settlement as instruments appeared from carefully guarded personal belongings. A fiddle, a small drum, even some simple wooden flutes joined together in melodies that made feet tap involuntarily. The Wampanoag contributed their own rhythmic chanting, creating an unusual but harmonious blend of European and Native American musical traditions. These impromptu concerts lasted well into the night, weaving cultural threads together through the power of shared melody. Dancing emerged naturally from the music, though it remained modest by our standards. The Pilgrims, bound by strict religious codes, limited themselves to simple circle dances and group movements that emphasized community rather than individual expression. Yet even these restrained celebrations represented a remarkable departure from their usual evening routines of prayer, scripture reading, and early retirement. Joy, it seemed, had temporarily overruled their typical austerity. Children found their own entertainment, creating games from whatever materials they could discover. Corn husks became dolls, smooth stones turned into marbles for rolling competitions, and fallen branches transformed into swords for mock battles. Their laughter echoed through the settlement, a sound so rare during the harsh months of survival that adults paused their own activities just to listen and smile at these precious moments of carefree childhood joy. Storytelling competitions emerged around the largest bonfire, with both cultures sharing their most captivating tales. Wampanoag elders spoke of ancient spirits, legendary hunts, and the creation of their homeland, while pilgrim men recounted dramatic sea voyages, narrow escapes, and divine interventions during their most desperate moments. These stories, told in flickering firelight, created bridges of understanding between two peoples who had initially viewed each other with suspicion and fear. Drinking games, though involving nothing stronger than fermented cider and beer, added to the festive atmosphere. The Pilgrims had brought brewing knowledge from England, and their modest alcoholic beverages helped loosen tongues and encourage friendships. Men who normally spoke only of work, weather, and worship found themselves sharing personal stories, family memories, and even cautious jokes as the evening progressed into the comfortable darkness of an autumn night. Target practice evolved into elaborate competitions, with men showing off their skills with bows, muskets, and even slingshots. The Wampanoag warriors demonstrated their incredible accuracy with traditional weapons, while the colonists displayed their firearms prowess. Rather than creating tension, these demonstrations generated mutual respect and admiration. Each group recognized the other's expertise, understanding that survival in this harsh land required multiple types of skills and knowledge. As the final night of celebration approached, the games grew quieter, more contemplative. People gathered in smaller groups, sharing personal conversations that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Wampanoag and English voices mixed together in the darkness, creating friendships that would endure long after the festivities ended. These intimate moments, perhaps more than the formal ceremonies, truly embodied the spirit of thanksgiving and mutual appreciation. The laughter gradually faded as exhaustion overtook excitement, and the settlement settled into a peaceful quiet. Bodies tired from days of unaccustomed celebration sought rest around dying fires, their faces still bearing traces of smiles from the day's merriment. Children curled up against their parents, while adults found comfortable spots near the warm embers, everyone drifting toward sleep with hearts fuller than they had been in months. The contrast was remarkable. These same people who had endured starvation, disease, and constant fear had discovered, if only briefly, the healing power of celebration and joy. Their normally rigid schedules, their austere religious practices, their survival focused mindset had given way to something beautifully human. For 3 precious days, they had remembered how to play, to laugh, to simply enjoy being alive in community with others. As you drift toward sleep tonight, imagine those weary pilgrims finally resting after their extraordinary celebration. Picture the dying firelight casting gentle shadows, the satisfied exhaustion of bodies well used in joyful activity, the peaceful breathing of people who had rediscovered hope through shared merriment. Their dreams, like yours, were probably filled with laughter, friendship, and the warm glow of unexpected happiness found in the most unlikely circumstances. Chapter 13, Echoes of a Bygone Era, a memento of a 3-day feast. As the final embers of cooking fires dimmed across Plymouth, as the last wooden bowls were cleared away, something extraordinary had taken root. 3 days of shared meals had woven invisible threads between two worlds, between the Wampanoag and the English settlers. The feast was ending, but its true gift was just beginning to unfold in ways neither culture could have imagined. The morning mist rose gently from the harbor, carrying with it the mingled aromas of roasted venison and corn pudding. Massasoit's people began gathering their belongings, their stomachs full, their hearts carrying new understanding. The pilgrims watched with quiet amazement, realizing they had witnessed something sacred. These weren't just neighbors sharing food, these were teachers sharing wisdom that would echo through centuries. The feast had become a living bridge between worlds. Squanto moved through the settlement one final time, his weathered hands touching the corn stalks he had taught them to plant. Without his knowledge of companion planting, without his understanding of fish fertilizer, this harvest celebration would never have existed. He had given them more than survival techniques. He had given them hope. His quiet presence had been the invisible thread connecting two peoples who spoke different languages but shared the same sky. The women of both cultures exchanged glances, filled with newfound respect. Wampanoag mothers had watched English wives struggle with unfamiliar ingredients, offering gentle guidance without words. English women had marveled at the efficiency of native cooking methods, the way corn could be transformed into countless nourishing forms. They had learned that motherhood, that caring for family, transcended all cultural boundaries. These lessons would be passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. Children from both communities played together one last time, their laughter echoing across the settlement like church bells. They had learned each other's games, shared crude toys carved from wood and stone. Language barriers dissolved in the universal joy of play. These children would grow up carrying memories of friendship that crossed cultural lines, memories that would influence how they saw the world. In their innocent games lay the seeds of understanding. The culinary secrets shared during those 3 days would transform both cultures forever. Pilgrim women learned to prepare succotash, that perfect marriage of corn and beans that would become an American staple. They discovered how to smoke fish, how to preserve meat without salt, how to turn tough root vegetables into tender delicacies. Meanwhile, Wampanoag cooks marveled at European techniques for bread making and cheese crafting. Knowledge flowed like a gentle river between communities. Entertainment had woven magic through those autumn days. Wampanoag dancers had shared sacred movements that honored the harvest, their bodies telling stories older than memory. English settlers had responded with hymns and folk songs that carried the melancholy beauty of distant homelands. Music became their common language, rhythm their shared heartbeat. These cultural exchanges created something entirely new, a distinctly American form of celebration that honored both traditions while creating something fresh. The harmony achieved during those precious days seemed almost miraculous. Two groups who had approached each other with suspicion, even fear, had found common ground in gratitude. They had discovered that despite different languages, different customs, different beliefs about land ownership. They shared fundamental human needs: the need for safety, for nourishment, for community. This revelation would echo through the generations, though sadly, it would not always be remembered or honored. As the final day drew to a close, both communities recognized they had participated in something sacred. This hadn't been merely a celebration of survival, though survival was surely worth celebrating. It had been a recognition of abundance, of the earth's generosity, of human capacity for cooperation. The land had provided, their combined knowledge had preserved it, and their shared labor had transformed it into sustenance. Gratitude flowed between them like warm honey. Mesaso Eight stood with Governor Bradford as the sun painted the horizon in shades of amber and rose. Neither man spoke much of the other's language, yet they understood each other perfectly in this moment. They had proven that peace was possible, that mutual benefit could grow from mutual respect. The treaty they had signed months earlier had been tested in the crucible of shared feast, and it had emerged stronger, more meaningful, tempered by genuine friendship. The forgotten skills revealed during those 3 days would prove invaluable for generations: preserving meat without refrigeration, growing crops in challenging soil, finding medicinal plants in the wilderness, creating warmth and light from forest resources. These weren't just survival techniques, they were connections to the natural world that modern life would gradually forget. The feast had been a master class in sustainable living, taught by experts who understood that humans and nature must work together. Stories were the invisible feast shared during those autumn days. Wampanoag elders spoke of seasons past, of times when the bay teemed with fish, when the forest provided everything needed for life. English settlers shared tales of distant homes, of loved ones left behind, of dreams that had carried them across dangerous seas. These stories became bridges connecting past to present, homeland to new land, one human experience to another. The bonds formed during those 3 days would prove both fragile and enduring. Some relationships would deepen over time, growing into genuine friendships that transcended cultural differences. Others would fade as politics, land disputes, and misunderstandings eroded trust. Yet the memory of what was possible, the proof that harmony could exist, would persist. It would become a beacon of hope during darker times, a reminder of our better angels. The seeds of modern Thanksgiving were planted in those precious October days of 1621, not in the turkey, which may not have graced their table, not in the cranberry sauce, which didn't exist yet, but in the spirit of gratitude that flowed between neighbors. The recognition that abundance shared becomes joy multiplied, that differences can enrich rather than divide, that thankfulness transforms ordinary meals into sacred communion. These were the true gifts of that first feast. As you drift toward sleep tonight, carry with you the gentle lessons of that long ago feast. Remember that gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a practice, a way of seeing abundance even in scarcity, of finding connection even across difference. The Pilgrims and Wampanoag showed us that when we approach others with open hearts, when we share what we have, when we listen more than we speak, miracles become possible. Peace becomes possible. The echoes of that 3 day feast still resonate today, in every family gathering, in every moment of thanks, in every bridge built between different worlds. Let those echoes lull you to sleep, carrying you toward dreams filled with golden harvests, with tables set for neighbors, with the quiet satisfaction of enough. Tomorrow, may you wake with the same spirit of gratitude that filled that Plymouth settlement, ready to create your own feast of connection and Thanksgiving. Chapter 14: Resurgence. The birth of Thanksgiving holidays. Picture America in 1863, a nation torn apart by civil war, when President Abraham Lincoln made a decision that would forever change how we gather around our tables. In the midst of unimaginable division, Lincoln saw something the Pilgrims would have recognized: the desperate need for gratitude, for unity, for hope. His proclamation would bridge centuries, connecting those first harvest celebrations to the holiday we know today, creating something beautiful from something broken. The idea came from Sarah Josepha Hale, editor of a popular women's magazine, who had been writing letters to presidents for nearly 2 decades. She envisioned a national day when all Americans, North and South, would pause their conflicts and remember their blessings. Lincoln listened, and on October 3rd, 1863, he issued his Thanksgiving proclamation, calling for the last Thursday in November to become a day of national gratitude. Even as cannons roared across battlefields, families would gather in peace. Lincoln's words echoed across a wounded nation. He spoke of fruitful fields, growing populations, expanding boundaries, and the preservation of peace with foreign nations. But most importantly, he acknowledged that these blessings came despite, or perhaps because of, the great trial facing the country. The Pilgrims had given thanks after their first harsh winter. Lincoln asked Americans to give thanks in the middle of their harshest season. War could not stop gratitude. Division could not defeat Thanksgiving. Not everyone embraced Lincoln's proclamation immediately. Some saw it as a Northern political gesture. Others questioned celebrating, while brothers fought brothers on distant battlefields. But gradually, quietly, families began to gather. They set tables with whatever they could find, shared what little they had, and discovered something the Pilgrims knew well: that gratitude grows strongest in the hardest soil. These early Thanksgiving celebrations were modest, humble, and profoundly meaningful, exactly as they were meant to be. After the war ended, Thanksgiving began to take root more deeply. Families who had been separated by conflict came together around tables. Veterans returned home to celebrations that felt both familiar and new. The holiday evolved, incorporating traditions from different regions, different cultures, different ways of giving thanks. Southern families added their own flavors. Western settlers brought new customs. Immigrants contributed dishes from distant lands. Thanksgiving was becoming truly American, diverse, welcoming, and ever-changing. As America entered the industrial age, Thanksgiving celebrations grew more elaborate. Railroads could transport families across greater distances, enabling reunions that would have been impossible in pilgrim times. Urban families began creating new traditions, while rural communities maintained connections to the agricultural roots of the holiday. Department stores started advertising Thanksgiving supplies. Newspapers published special recipes. The holiday was becoming commercialized, yet somehow the essential spirit of gratitude remained. Thanksgiving was adapting, surviving, thriving in a changing world. President Franklin Roosevelt faced his own national crisis, and like Lincoln before him, he turned to Thanksgiving for unity. During the Great Depression, when families struggled to put food on tables, the holiday took on deeper meaning. Communities organized group dinners, neighbors helped neighbors, churches opened their doors to feed the hungry. Roosevelt moved the date 1 week earlier in 1939, hoping to boost Christmas shopping. The controversy that followed reminded everyone Thanksgiving belonged to the people, not politicians. The early 20th century saw Thanksgiving transform into something the Pilgrims might not recognize, yet would surely appreciate: Parades began appearing in major cities. Macy's started their famous parade in 1924. Football games became traditional. Families gathered around radios to listen together. The meal itself grew more elaborate. Turkey became the centerpiece. Stuffing, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie. These additions weren't betrayals of Pilgrim tradition, they were evolutions, each generation adding their own layer of gratitude to the celebration. World War I brought new meaning to Thanksgiving. Families gathered knowing loved ones were fighting overseas. They set empty places at tables, saved portions for those who couldn't come home, sent care packages filled with traditional foods to soldiers in distant trenches. The holiday became a bridge, connecting those at home with those far away. Letters from the front described makeshift Thanksgiving celebrations in muddy camps, proving that gratitude, like love, transcends distance. Like the Pilgrims, Americans were learning to give thanks amidst uncertainty. The Roaring Twenties brought abundance to many American tables. Thanksgiving feasts grew larger, more elaborate, more indulgent. Department stores created elaborate window displays. Magazines published glossy photographs of perfect holiday spreads. Radio programs featured Thanksgiving specials. The holiday was becoming a performance, a production, yet beneath the glamour, families still gathered with genuine gratitude, still shared stories, still honored the simple act of coming together. The Pilgrim spirit endured, dressed in modern clothes, but essentially unchanged at its heart. Hollywood discovered Thanksgiving, creating movies that shaped how Americans imagined the perfect holiday. Norman Rockwell painted scenes that became iconic, his art capturing both the idealized version and the genuine warmth of family gatherings. Radio shows brought families together around their sets, sharing stories and music that connected households across the nation. These media representations weren't just entertainment, they were creating a shared vision of Thanksgiving, a common dream of what the holiday could be: warm, welcoming, wonderfully imperfect. World War II tested American Thanksgiving. Once again, rationing limited traditional foods, families made do with substitutes. Turkey was scarce, sugar was precious, butter was a luxury. Yet somehow, these limitations brought families closer to the Pilgrim experience, making much from little, finding abundance in scarcity, being grateful for what they had rather than mourning what they lacked. Victory gardens supplied vegetables, neighbors shared resources, communities pulled together. Thanksgiving during wartime reminded everyone gratitude isn't about the size of the feast. The post-war boom transformed Thanksgiving into the celebration we recognize today. Suburban kitchens hummed with new appliances. Frozen foods made preparation easier. Television brought the Macy's parade into living rooms across America. Families could travel more easily. Reunions grew larger. Traditions became more elaborate. Yet at the center of all this abundance, the essential elements remained unchanged. Families gathering, sharing food, expressing gratitude, telling stories. The Pilgrims would have recognized the heart of these celebrations, even if the surface looked completely different. Television created new Thanksgiving traditions. Families gathered around small screens to watch parades together. Football games became appointment viewing. Special holiday episodes of popular shows brought additional entertainment. The medium that some feared would separate families actually brought them closer, giving them shared experiences to discuss over dinner. Children who might have been restless at long adult conversations now had something to anticipate. The Pilgrims had used storytelling to bind their community. Americans were doing the same, just with different tools. By the 1950s and 60s, Modern Thanksgiving had fully emerged. The holiday now spanned 4 days for many families, beginning with parades on Thursday morning, continuing through football games in the afternoon, extending into a long weekend of leftovers and lingering conversations. Department stores moved immediately to Christmas displays, creating the shopping season that would define American retail. Yet families protected Thursday itself, keeping it sacred, keeping it focused on gratitude, keeping it connected to those first hesitant Thanksgivings, centuries earlier in Plymouth. And so the circle completed itself, from those uncertain pilgrims sharing an autumn meal with Wampanoag neighbors, to Lincoln's proclamation during national crisis, to modern families gathering around abundant tables. Thanksgiving had become something both ancient and contemporary, both simple and complex, both personal and communal. The holiday the Pilgrims began had grown, adapted, evolved, but never lost its essential character, the recognition that gratitude, shared with others, transforms ordinary moments into sacred ones. Thanksgiving was reborn, and it was beautiful. Chapter 15, Ebb and Flow, Thanksgiving in Our Modern Lives. As we drift into this final chapter, let's explore how Thanksgiving has evolved, flowing like a gentle river through time. Today's celebration looks quite different from that original 1621 gathering, yet something beautiful remains unchanged. The heart of gratitude, beating softly through generations, connecting us all in ways we're only beginning to understand. Modern Thanksgiving embraces diversity like never before. Families gather from every corner of the world, bringing new flavors, new stories, new traditions. Some prepare turkey with Korean spices, others serve tamales alongside cranberry sauce. Muslim families might offer halal alternatives, while vegetarian tables bloom with harvest vegetables. Each household writes its own beautiful chapter in this ever expanding story of gratitude. In today's kitchens, cooking techniques blend old and new. Grandmothers guide granddaughters through ancient family secrets, while YouTube tutorials teach forgotten arts. Slow cookers bubble quietly, instant thermometers ensure perfect results, yet the most magical moments happen when flour dusted hands work together, kneading love into every loaf, stirring memories into every pot, creating connection through the simple act of preparing food. Time honored recipes travel through generations like treasured heirlooms, handwritten cards yellowed with age, margins filled with loving notes. A pinch more salt here, cook longer there. These recipes carry more than ingredients, they hold the essence of those who came before. Each dish tells a story of survival, of celebration, of love served on ceramic plates, warm and nourishing. Around modern dinner tables, stories unfold like gentle waves. Children learn about great grandparents they never met. Adults share memories of Thanksgivings past. Laughter mingles with the soft clink of silverware. Someone always tells the story of the time the turkey burned, or when Uncle Joe fell asleep in the mashed potatoes. These tales become family legend, woven into the fabric of belonging. Football games provide the soundtrack to modern Thanksgiving, the gentle murmur of commentators, the distant cheers from living rooms create a uniquely American lullaby. Some families gather around screens, others retreat to quiet corners with books. Children play touch football in backyards, while adults doze in comfortable chairs. The rhythm of the holiday, predictable and soothing, like a familiar song. Picture the soft glow of family filled homes, windows golden with warm light, silhouettes moving gently within, the scent of cinnamon and sage drifting on cool evening air, porch lights welcoming late arrivals, cars lined along quiet streets, each home a sanctuary, each family creating their own small miracle of togetherness, of gratitude, of love made visible through simple acts of sharing. Light and shadows dance together, creating cozy warmth throughout modern homes. Candles flicker on dining tables, casting gentle shadows on familiar faces. String lights twinkle softly, fires crackle in hearths. The interplay of brightness and darkness creates an atmosphere of intimate comfort, where conversations flow like honey and silence feels like a warm embrace, everything bathed in golden contentment. How different this warmth feels from those harsh surviving conditions of 1621. While we adjust our thermostats with the touch of a button, the pilgrims huddled around small fires. While we worry about overcooking the turkey, they worried about having enough food to survive winter. Yet somehow, across centuries, the essence remains the same: gratitude born from recognizing life's precious gifts. Our modern conveniences would seem like magic to those early settlers: refrigerators preserving food, ovens maintaining perfect temperatures, grocery stores offering abundance year round. Yet perhaps we've lost something too: that sharp awareness of survival, that profound appreciation for each meal, each warm shelter, each moment of safety. Maybe our comfort has softened our gratitude, or maybe it's simply changed its shape. Across all our diverse traditions, something beautiful emerges. Shared appreciation transcends cultural boundaries. A Muslim family giving thanks to Allah, a Jewish family lighting candles, a secular family honoring nature, a Christian family blessing their meal. Each expression different, yet each arising from the same human impulse: to pause, to recognize abundance, to acknowledge our interconnectedness with something greater than ourselves. This common essence links all festivities like invisible threads weaving through every celebration. Whether the table holds turkey or tofurkey, whether prayers are spoken in English or Spanish, whether families gather in mansions or apartments, the heart remains constant. That moment when conversation quiets, when eyes meet across the table, when hearts open to receive the gift of this shared moment. This is Thanksgiving's true inheritance. Perhaps we haven't moved so far from the Pilgrims after all. They gathered with neighbors who became family. We gather with friends who become chosen family. They shared resources for survival. We share stories for connection. They offered thanks for making it through another season. We offer thanks for making it through another year. The forms evolve, but the substance endures. Gratitude as timeless as breathing. In our time of abundance, gratitude takes on new dimensions, not just thankful for survival, but for opportunity, for diversity, for the freedom to create new traditions, for the wisdom to honor old ones. We give thanks for full bellies and warm homes, but also for the chance to share these blessings, to extend our tables, to welcome strangers, to transform abundance into generosity. As evening settles over Thanksgiving homes, a peaceful reflection begins. Dishes cleared, conversations winding down, children sleeping off turkey and pie, adults settling into comfortable quiet. The day's gratitude settles like snow, gentle and transforming, covering everything in soft acknowledgement of life's daily miracles, of love shared and received, of another Thanksgiving lived, another memory made, another circle of gratitude complete. And so our Sleepy Holidays narrative wraps in a warm wave of gratitude. Like those first pilgrims, we gather, we share, we give thanks. The methods change, the heart remains. Rest now in this knowledge that gratitude connects us all, across time, across cultures, across every difference that might divide us. Let thankfulness be your lullaby tonight, gentle and eternal, carrying you softly toward peaceful sleep.